For the next panel, we have Getting Dev Love, How Chains Are Building Mindshare with Devs. So basically, how do smart contract platforms entice developers and gain mindshare with them? Is it cheap gas, high TPS, or something else that wins the market share fight? I guess I'll leave it with Patrick. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. So I don't want to waste too much time, and we're still waiting on Diwaker here. But we have a fantastic panel. I'm really excited to hear what we're talking about here. As Adam said, how do we get mindshare for devs to build on these decentralized platforms? There's a ton of different places we can go here, right? How do we gain mindshare? Is it cheap gas? Is it high TPS? I know Emin kind of touched on a lot of really good pieces there, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel. So we have Illia, the co-founder of Near. We have Nick White, the co-founder of Harmony. Kevin Davis, lead engineer of Kava Labs, and Walker, the head of engineer at Blockstack. So everyone on this panel here is very familiar with kind of what it takes to build a decentralized platform and build some of these applications, these decentralized applications that are bringing us into this fourth industrial revolution. So without further ado, I'll leave you guys there with that. How do we get engineers to be interested to build on these platforms?
I can start. I think there's, obviously a lot of kind of angles to this. I think there is a kind of business angle, which is how do people build businesses, right? And if you build business, then you have money and resources to pretty much hire engineers that will learn how to do it. There's kind of the indie hacker, kind of like early internet. I don't care about how it's useful, but I want to just build something cool mindset. And obviously, this is kind of very different. The things you want to entice people like that is very different from business kind of entrepreneurs. And I think Ethereum has been starting by these indie developers, right? A lot of it was kind of, hey, I can build something cool. And then when there was a proven story about kind of few types of applications, there's then a kind of stream of entrepreneurs and kind of people who want to build business and raise money with it came in. And I think as the next generation of platforms kind of coming in, I think we need to kind of repeat the same thing, right? We need to get a bunch of indie developers really excited about this. And we also need to prove to entrepreneurs pretty much that they can build new types of businesses. And we can dig in deeper.
I'm happy to go next.
Nick, you want to continue? Okay.
Sorry, can folks still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Looks like there was just a little bit of lag.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was saying that the way I like to think about it is, there is an existing crypto ecosystem, and relative to the broader sort of market around technology and software development, it's still minuscule. So if you look at the existing crypto ecosystem, I think that in terms of, what are the problems that we are trying to solve or we see sort of existing in maybe in other platforms? And I think from a developer perspective, I think people want to see systems that are easy to understand, easy to program in, easy to debug, harder to make mistakes in, and where there are fewer surprises. As an end user of someone who's interacting with a smart contract, I want to have a feel of sense of transparency, that I know what the smart contract is actually going to do, a sense of safety that I understand what the behavior will be, and I have some safeguards. I can control the worst case scenario here. And from a miner perspective, I want predictability. I want to know exactly what the smart contract will cost me, and is it worth my time to include it in my block and be able to make that analysis. So those are, I think, problems sort of worth solving for the existing market. But then if you look at the broader ecosystem, 99% of the developers out there and end users haven't even heard of crypto, let alone know what a smart contract platform is. And so there, at least, our thinking is more oriented around, the reality is that crypto as an industry is still in an early stage, and many of us are still essentially, trying to really identify what is the product market fit here, what are true applications that are meaningfully solving problems for developers and end users. And I think the answer is that, there are very few, very known sort of successful answers out there. So our orientation is more around experimentation. How do we get the most learning to happen? How do we get the most experiments to happen? Because the more experiments people do, the more things people try out, the more we learn, the more we'll be able to finesse, the more we'll be able to mature the platforms and the applications and the businesses. So that's our orientation around, thinking about the blue sky of developers and users outside of crypto.
I'm happy to go next. I just want to say this is a great topic for any panel, because I think that's really on the top of mind of so many people, not just those of us who are building new layer 1 protocols, but everyone's trying to figure out where's the future of blockchain development going to live, because what we're witnessing on Ethereum is that there are very strong network effects that come from not only the interoperability of different decentralized applications, but also from the liquidity and the amount of assets. Like, I think those are two of the strongest kind of network effects that tend to kind of draw most of the development activity and users into one place. So it's hard to imagine, when you look at Ethereum, you feel like, wow, they just have so much volume, there's so much activity. How can we replicate that? But I like what Diwaker said about the fact that we're still so early. If you're only looking inwardly into crypto and you're thinking, wow, it'll be so hard to take developers from another ecosystem like Ethereum, then you're probably thinking too small, because the reality is that this industry is still so early. And in terms of the overall developer mindshare that's still out there, there's still so much green pastures. And so I think from Harmony's perspective, one of the most important things that we can do is to help people understand that I think people are going to be very excited about building specifically decentralized finance applications, but they will want to avoid some of the problems that are already happening on Ethereum due to congestion. I've been using various decentralized finance products, and it's not just the fees, like paying $10 to make a swap or anything. It's also the finality, and the fact that it sometimes takes 15 minutes before the transaction is processed. So I think that various platform benefits, not just low cost but fast finality, and in Harmony's case, we're able to do it in 5 seconds, will be very those will sort of be like differentiators. And I think the next question is, how do you bridge liquidity between platforms? And we're seeing a lot of, I think Anir's done a great job with their Rainbow Bridge. Harmony, we're working on a similar bridge mechanism that will allow sort of the fluid flow of assets from Ethereum and other blockchains to Harmony. And I think once we start to see interoperability, I think platforms will compete more on the basis of just the fundamental performance of their underlying chains. So I think there's so many different ways to look at it, but those are a few off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to sort of jump off. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like trends that I'm seeing sort of in this sort of space over the last 12 months, because we've had an explosion sort of activity in DeFi, as well as we've had some of the most exciting layer 1 projects launch in the last 12 months. And it's kind of opened up a brand new sort of area for people to explore. So I think there's a few constants. Sort of, you have to have developers on your team. It's there, I'm not going to name names, but there are platforms, if you go out, you kick the tires on it, it's clear that the people who built it aren't the developers, and it's hard to find out who's going to support you. So there has to be a feeling of, I'm joining a community of like-minded developers. And I think increasingly what we're seeing is that the platforms themselves are starting to take an opinionated sort of approach to this. So it's not just green pastures, it's, I want you to come build a DeFi application. And we're going to put in a lot of effort to make sure that the liquidity is there, the tooling is there, that we're going to use some of our own layer 1 marketing spend or sort of mindshare spend to attract people to this particular use case. I think DeFi is where that is today, but we're already seeing sort of like DeFi merging with the world of gaming, or sort of gamifying money. And so we're quickly going to see people, sort of, how can we apply that angle to our layer 1? How can we build the tooling that sort of onboards the next generation of now more gaming focused developers into some game that also has a decentralized finance aspect? And then, as you guys say, taking opinionated stances on solving particular problems, right? We've all had Ethereum transactions get stuck. It's not fun. If you want to solve that particular pain point and sort of onboard developers with the guarantee of like, your users are going to have a better time than they do today, that's sort of another sort of round that I think we're going to see. But yeah, it's a very fast moving space, I think, right now, because of how many projects are launching and how quickly sort of realities of interoperability as well as the limitations of Ethereum are being reached.
So you each touched on a lot of really important pieces, and I kind of wanted to ask a question here too. So we kind of talked about like some of the business needs. We also touched on some of the key pieces that developers need, like it needs to be able to be debugged easily. The transparency needs to be there. It can't be too costly, so they can jump on it and work it. But at the same time, we talk about, hey, for gaming, for DeFi, a lot of these big businesses, they're going to need specific use cases that a developer might not be thinking of. So is it the developers who's actually going to be the ones who are choosing, where we lift off? And yes, we're still early, and yes, there's a lot of green pastures, but the trajectory that we get started on may, lead the way for where we're going to end up. So is it the developers? Is it the business people? Who are kind of the key important people for deciding which chains actually continue to take off?
I think at the end it will be users, right? Because at the end it's so in my head there's kind of two types of applications. There's one type of application which is, let's call it a dApp, right? It's a application that quote unquote doesn't have a operator, and you need to use a wallet or you need to be aware of the blockchain you're using to be able to use the application. And then there's an app that runs on blockchain, right? And this is where usually you have some kind of operator, and they usually hide the blockchain from you, and you still get some benefits, but at least initially you don't need to know, right? And so definitely for dApps, the users will be driving it, right? If you can convince users to switch, right? If you can convince people to or on board to new types of applications, right? You find new set of users that want to kind of jump on this new application, and for that they will learn all the kind of blockchain details. That's kind of one direction, and then the other direction is obviously people just the kind of businesses and developers build in such a way where they hide the blockchain and they provide a service kind of as a package, right? So I think for these two cases, right, it will be a different choice, right? So for dApps, right, and which is DeFi right now, it kind of lives in this dApp kind of framework, right? It will be mostly users, right? Right now, actually, we have layer ones launched, right? But people are not really shifting to run even when the transaction fees are high, because it is actually very complicated for a user to kind of migrate to a different chain. And for apps, right, actually a bunch of apps are running on other chains, and we just don't know about it because, well, they hit blockchain reasonably well, right? I think good example DLive, there's Eva and few others that kind of, Audios is a good example as well. So those will be really driven by characteristics and performance and developer kind of developer characteristics, right? So I think this is two frameworks that we should be kind of distinguishing when we're analyzing this. But I also do want to point out that I do think even though characteristics of the blockchain, performance, it is important, but at the same time, I think all of kind of modern blockchains are reasonably on the same level. But the kind of this intangible things, including what Kevin mentioned, some of the kind of support that different protocols giving to different kind of use cases in different teams, I think that's where actually kind of interesting differentiation and interesting directions will come out for kind of developer association.
Yeah, I think for me, metrics like transactions per second, they feel meaningless without context. I spent a lot of time in the database world, and there's a 30-year history of people building faster and faster databases that beat the TPS metric on a very contrived set of benchmarks. But most people don't really look at that when they're trying to make a decision, right? Most people look at the holistic set of, are you actually solving my problem? Is there a good ecosystem around the product, whether it's in terms of, commercial support, a strong community, a vibrant ecosystem, what have you. And so I think it's really important to sort of orient around, what are the workloads, what are the problems, what are the use cases. I think someone mentioned earlier that, maybe it was Illia, that in the early days of crypto, it attracted, and I think still attracts a lot of tinkerers and hobbyists and people who tend to be early adopters for any kind of technology. and we'll continue to have that, I think, for a while. And we are starting to see now, I think, solid teams with real meat and strength behind the teams, real thought around sort of business models and sustainability, where we're really thinking of building crypto native businesses on top of these platforms. And so I think we'll start to see some of that happen in parallel while there's a lot of tinkering going on. And as I was saying earlier, I think for the most part, we are still in the process of, like, as an industry, identifying good use cases for product market fit. And over the next, year or 2 years, I think we'll see a lot of that happening. And, looking back at the last 2 years, like between 2017 and now, like DeFi emerged as one of those classes of applications. And I think we'll see more of those emerge, both compelling for developers and that are compelling for end users. And then you'll start to see, real companies and businesses starting to form in those verticals, just like we're seeing for DeFi right now.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a number of different factors going on here. Something that I think is interesting is you kind of both were touching on the users a little bit and how they're actually going to be the ones to drive which chains get adopted. I would love to hear some thoughts on how kind of the user is choosing these applications and picking these applications, but it's the developer that's actually building them. Does the developer have to build it first? The user approves it, and then developer keeps going? I'm kind of thinking like this chicken or egg type thing, right? Like if a developer gets comfortable with a platform, do they just keep building until it's good? Or, does a user say, oh, this looks like a cool project? Like you guys kind of see what I'm saying here? Like which comes first? Is it the user adoption, or do developers just keep building cool platforms and that's how the adoption comes?
I'll jump in on this one, actually.
Oh, go for it, Kevin.
Yeah. So I think what's been interesting is developers often have something in mind and users will adopt it and then change its direction. And so today, right, typically that's meant iterating on a single product on a single platform. But I think in the future, we're going to see apps basically get to the breaking point of the particular platform that they're on. And then there's going to be the sort of difficult question for the developers, because you're correct, right? Developers onboard to a platform, a way of thinking, a way of developing. They get comfortable in it. And when it breaks, they try to fix it iteratively. Whereas users can say sort of like, we think that this is fundamentally broken. You need to go and fix something, at a greater scale. And we haven't seen much of that today, but I do think that sort of at the limit, there's going to be platform switches as well as potentially hard forks, where essentially communities say, we're going to leave this project if you sort of don't leave, and we're going to incentivize someone to build it somewhere else. And so I think that's a fascinating dynamic that we're not quite there yet, but that will become a reality as these sort of layer one scaling and feature wars sort of heat up.
I think that's a great point, Kevin. And I would add that, for the past 4 years since Ethereum has really been launched, it's been sort of a explorative project where people have been experimenting, building different kinds of things, seeing what sticks, and then as things get proven out, all of a sudden, I think that work that those developers put in can kind of be replicated and built on other platforms. So I think DeFi as an industry within blockchain has sort of put in the time and effort to prove out certain different models. Like, automated market makers are proving to be a very efficient way to sort of create ways that people can swap assets. Same thing with lending pools like Compound and Aave. And I think, so in some sense, the developers have to put in the upfront resources to experiment and find the models that work. But then once we find the models that work, I think it's kind of like fair game for new developers to come in and replicate them and try to attract users. So even, we're kind of seeing that right now in real time with SushiSwap that's trying to basically undermine Uniswap and steal all of the liquidity. So I think we're going to see similar games being played going forward, where developers now know what users want because other people have put in the hard work, and they're going to try to basically steal that from the other communities, and it's going to be very community oriented. I mean, look at the success of the Wi-Fi token as well. It's the no pre-mine, this whole idea that the community governs it. That's what users are saying that they want. So I see those two as kind of like sort of like the pendulum swinging between people exploring and being the first people to understand where the future is going to be, and then the new people coming in and trying to take the ball from them and run with it. So I think we're kind of in that transition phase right now.
Yeah, to speak to that point, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know, you.
No, I was just going to say I really like the fact that Nick mentioned community, because I do think sort of these words that we use, like developers, users, what they mean in traditional context. I think in crypto, they take on a whole new meaning, and the community aspect is so critical in crypto, especially in the early days. I mean, there are many projects out there that we're all familiar with that are largely running on the sort of the energy of their community, like not on the strength of the technology, not on the strength of the project, but really just running on the energy of the community. And so I think like in the early days, or maybe early is relative, like the tight feedback loop between the community of people who are building, people who are experimenting, people who are trying those products, like the developer user community overlap in that Venn diagram is pretty strong. And then some projects, some products will manage to kind of break out of that and really go out for users, in the broader context. And you can say like maybe Bitcoin, if as an application has managed to do that to some degree. But I think most crypto projects and applications still haven't really managed to break that. All of our users are still very much within crypto already.
Yeah, so you each touched on, again, a lot of really important pieces where Nick was saying, hey, you're going to need somebody to be that first adopter to build something, and then that will foster the curiosity of the other developers to come in. Diwaker saying, hey, the community is going to be really important, and getting that tight feedback loop is going to be a really big piece. However, I forget who said it, but somebody also said, hey, at the same time though, it's really hard to switch platforms. So I kind of wanted to ask two questions here. The first one being, do we think we're at a stage, or we ever will be at a stage, where we can kind of just bounce around blockchain to blockchain, like engineers can kind of almost like flavor of the week, develop on blockchains, and it's really easy for them to switch around? Or do you think that they're going to really try to stick with one platform, and maybe there will be like a one platform beats all? That's kind of like another conversation. But yeah, any thoughts there, guys?
So I actually wanted to kind of double down on what Nick said, and like I do think that like there's people who proven out, and then kind of now that proven out, like there's kind of expansion and explosion, right? But at the same time, I actually don't agree that people will be kind of like people have forked things all the time, right? But I have never seen so far like a fork that has been beaten the kind of original thing, right? And the reason is because I think like we are in a very different world than like even if you're building a company, right? Like if you're building a company, you like somebody proven business model but doesn't execute very well, and you like raise more money, do the same business model, execute on sales, and get kind of get ahead, right, and accelerate faster. And I think like here there's like critical chain differences, right? One is everything is open and everything is kind of open source, right? Like it's in a way, right? Even though like we're kind of all competitors, but at the same time we're all working together, right? And the second thing is there's a community is a concept, right? Where like the reality is the people who kind of want to build on top, right, or want to build something else are actually part of the community anyway. And because it's open source, they're kind of working in the same ecosystem anyway. So like it's actually kind of, it's not a pendulum, right? I feel like it's more like, and that's what DeFi is. It's like a tree, right? It's explosion of things building on top of each other, trying to experiment and trying to see what works and what doesn't. And most of it is not like competitive per se, right? I mean, sure, like things provide the same functionality, right? But at the end, like the kind of origin usually captures some interesting concepts as well. And I think the same thing is about actually Ethereum, and like for a while at least, it will be the platform that kind of is this like root of the tree, right? And this is why, for example, we built Rainbow Bridge, which connects to Ethereum, right? Is because we don't see it as like kind of stealing away developers or stealing away community, right? We see it as complementing and providing developers with the functionality that they need to deliver like what their community asking for, while still kind of completely interoperating with the existing ecosystem, right? So in a way, like nobody's leaving Ethereum, right? Everybody's just building like more stuff around to kind of complement and like add stuff and grow, quote unquote, this like tree of applications that kind of interacting with each other. So like I think I think like coming out of this competitive kind of mindset into more like how do we complement each other and how do we really like figure out how like 1 + 1 equals quote unquote 3, right, under a different field, let's just call it. This is where like I think the value is versus trying like again like it is like the current space is very small. I think like the more excitement we have in the space, the more new developers were coming. Like during 2019, there's almost no inflow of developers, sadly, into the space. I think like hopefully now we're gonna have more developers coming, but at the end it's still a pretty small kind of group. So a lot of it is just kind of how do we give them tools to kind of grow their like success in a way versus kind of provide them with a platform that's like they need to shift or whatever.
Yeah. Again, as we were saying earlier, we're so early in the industry that I think having a positive sum mindset that we are all trying to grow the pie is much more healthy than thinking that it's a zero-sum game and the only way to grow is to take business or competition away from someone else. The second thing I would say, I personally don't believe that there's going to be a one-size-fits-all blockchain. I think there's just the design space of things that people are trying to do and trade-offs that they're making and problems they're trying to solve is vast. And I don't think there's going to be, just like there isn't like a single database that works for everyone for everything. So there will be multiple blockchains. And to that point, like I will say that the switching cost is very real. And I think we have a long ways to go in terms of interoperability. Like I know many people who built successful businesses on Ethereum who hate the development environment and experience or the end user experience, but who feel like they're kind of stuck in it. And so they're trying to work with the system and make progress in it, despite sort of the known shortcomings. And this isn't new or unique to crypto either. And those same, you could argue that I built everything in Kubernetes, and so I could just port my infrastructure over from Google Cloud to Amazon or whatever else very quickly. But in reality, that rarely happens, and the cost is pretty high. And so I hope that as an ecosystem, as a broader industry, we continue to make progress towards interoperability. But I think there's a long way to go there.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump into we have a 3-minute warning here. So last question for the panel here, and it's been fantastic so far. I could literally ask questions for the next few hours. But as far as kind of again getting these engineers to build these next gen platforms, these next gen applications, what role does having like a blockchain agnostic Oracle system like Chainlink have on choosing a platform to build upon?
I love that you brought that up, because I was also going to say that one of the things that is huge in terms of convincing developers to move over to a new platform is that you have to have all the other building blocks, right? And for DeFi specifically, one of the biggest building blocks is having an Oracle. That's why Harmony was so thrilled last month to announce that we'll be working with you guys, and we have a working price feed on our testnet and hopefully soon on mainnet, because to us, that's a huge selling point to the developer community. So yeah, definitely, I think an Oracle is key.
Yeah, and I think one sort of way to think about this is essentially there will be building blocks for each platform, but then there will be meta building blocks that sort of span all platforms. And an Oracle seems like an infrastructure for the communication, right, of off-chain data. Seems like it'll be the first meta building block that just has to exist for sort of any platform to attract developers. And then sort of we'll build on top of that sort of more platform agnostic tooling. I don't think we'll ever get the switching costs down to zero, but when you're looking to build something new, you'll look at the tooling that's provided at the base layer and then what's above the base layer that already exists. and that's sort of how you'll begin to build.
Yeah, I second what Nick said. I mean, in general, and Kevin, like pretty much you have kind of building components, right? And like this tree is like built on top of kind of this infrastructure, and Chainlink is definitely one of the core providers of this functionality. And we also have announced a partnership recently, and I think we had the demo actually today with it running on testnet. So
yeah, I can maybe round that out by saying that building interesting applications requires like interesting functionality, and if you're running something on blockchain, like you need a way to talk to like off-chain world around you and get that information, and the sort of Oracle model is critical for that. And I really like, I think Chainlink has executed an impressive integration and partnership strategy, sort of solidifying that sense of like familiarity and comfort. Like if you think about someone coming into a new platform and they know that Chainlink is available, they know kind of sort of what to expect and what they'll be able to build with that. So I'm hoping that Chainlink will be active in the Stacks ecosystem as well in the near future here. And on our end, on a more personal note, there are still some capabilities that we want to build in the blockchain itself that can make it easier to construct oracles of all kinds, Chainlink included. So we're looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, panel here. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope that everyone got a lot out of this, because I know for a fact that I did. So thank you so much. And I think we're having Adam jump back in.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Chainlink.
Thank you.
Thank you.